Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, high-ranking officers, students, we are beginning our first panel. Panel is officially called the panel of the General Staff of Slovenian Armed Forces, but we can call it the Generals Panel. We have 4 distinguished, highly ordained generals here with all soldiers, and admiral, and all 360 degrees soldiers with very long CVs. We already started this panel at the lunch. You have to know we're already prepared for this. And let me just give you a brief outline of the purpose of this panel, and then then we will start. So the aim is firstly to discuss and analyze the past challenges in European security and with NATO, and we'll then go shortly to the current challenges, which is probably the most important question here. What are our concerns? What are the scenarios? And then at the end, if there is still some time, we will try to discuss the future. What are the trends for the future? What we need to do to prevent hopefully preventable scenario. So this is the plan. We have 60 minutes, but allow me just a couple of brief thoughts about the past. As we know, NATO was established in 1949 as an alliance for collective self-defense, Article 5, as an alliance for consultation, transatlantic consultation, Article 4, and as a tool for promoting stability, Article 2. In its turbulent evolution, NATO adopted several strategic concepts, also transformed, created complex structures, like maybe I will mention just one, ACT, Special Command for Transformation, thinking about future doctrines and future capabilities. Deterrence was made as a key concept of preventing nuclear and conventional attack, and NATO enlarged several times. In 2004, also with Slovenia, lately with Finland and Sweden. To surprise of all of us, public opinion changed drastically in 1 year, in less than 1 year, in these 2 countries, and public supports membership in NATO. In the 19th, PFP was established for cooperating with interested partners, Austria, also here, also Slovenia, and I will mention also that Russia was also cooperated excellently with NATO, especially in the field of counter-terrorism. Then came period of various international operations. Afghanistan, I'll mention just Afghanistan, which sadly finished with a lot of experiences, but also somehow painfully in a way. And then we have events in 2008 and 2014, which are game-changing events actually. We have annexation of Crimea. We have 2 years ago Russian attack on Ukraine, and somehow European bubble of peace bubble is blurring, is going away. The trust in Europe and confidence in Europe is vanishing. Public perceptions have changed, policies have changed, capabilities. We are building up new military capabilities. We are thinking the old scenarios, and it seems somehow that we are back to the future. We're back to the future. So here are our generals and admiral with their opinions about this. And the first speaker is Lieutenant General Robert Glavaš. I have to apologize. Their CVs, like I said, 360 degrees CVs. They did many things. I will just point out a couple of things. Chief of General Staff of the Slovenian Armed Forces. In his career, he was first reserve officer, and then he was commander at different levels, from platoon, company, battalion, and brigade. He was deployed to Kosovo, Afghanistan, led several military exercises, and from the rest I will pick interesting one, President of the NATO CIMIC Center of Excellence Steering Committee in The Hague. General, what are your thoughts about the present challenges and about the past transformations?
It's workable? It's working? Yeah. Before I starting with my point of view, where we are and where we were last 33 years, it's my honor and pleasure to say like this: Chris, Pino, Rudolf, thank you to be part of our panel, our discussion, I'm sure that these three guys left with me, it's very important in this NATO environment. Of course, Austria is not part of NATO, but definitely they're looking from European Union country how we as NATO operate today, tomorrow, and of course what was in the past. I would like to go back definitely 33 years, 34 years, when we start to build our military. Everybody in this audience, in this room, definitely know that Slovenia, 1991, declared independent, and through the war, we have our country. Through the war, we established our military from territorial defense units to Slovenian professional forces. So what was crucial that time, and it's also actual today, conscript system. As we know, 1991, we start with many our boots, camp boots, and start to train our young population to be soldier inside of Slovenian forces or in reserve units. We were successful, definitely, through these, let me say, 10 years. We had a lot of our young population who passed all of this boots camp. 6 months was the time. Anyway, and we declared to be NATO member, NATO country, and we would like to join to NATO. Of course, this was very simple to say, but very hard to do it. I see these many things where we are working on that. The first is definitely reintegration from territorial defense units with own task, own purposes, to modern Slovenian armed forces. And this was a process 13 years. 13 years. So modernization was taken into account, money was growing up. Of course, we had this, as I mentioned, conscript system. But anyway, in these 13 years, from 1991 to 2004, we established good fundamental forces that everybody recognized that we are capable, that we are partner for all of NATO countries. And of course, 2004 was this our, for us, deadline that we are member of NATO. Of course, all of this year, we had a lot of changes. Many times we change our structure, we change equipment, of course, and we're working on standardization. So minimum capability requirements, interoperability was one of key tasks in Slovenian forces, how we will be better and how we can understand each other with our NATO partners. And in the end, if I conclude this, definitely in these 13 years before we joined to NATO, we had a great progress, which of course it's not finished yet, definitely. Military is an institution where we need to go every day with some new procedures, with new, let me say, tactics, if I need to go a little bit down there. But anyway, I think that we are a credible partner at this moment in NATO. Of course, we need to build our capabilities. We know where we are. We know that financial inputs in Slovenian forces growing up, and this is very successful, and it's good for military, for modernization. And of course, behind of this is modernization. Everybody talking about just modernization means buy new equipment, buy new tanks, buy new 8x8 vehicles, but this is not true. Modernization means changes, tactics, change regulations, legislations, change philosophy of units. So, and this is our task today. Today we are thinking about how we'll spend money, what kind of modernization we need, based on, as I mentioned, management, documents, rules, and everything. So, and I hope we are going in proper way. Of course, NATO is not same like 5 years ago, not 10 or 15 years ago. We know that Russian aggression on Ukraine give us another perspective. Are we good? Where we are? What we need to do? And based on this, they, from NATO side, also in the European Union, they produce new documents. We're talking about DDA, we're talking about secure strategic guidance, we're talking about regional plans. And we, all of NATO countries, we need to establish our system, how we will connect national defense plans to the regional plans, which is the NATO plans. And we are working on that. So challenges, a lot of work need to be done in the future. But anyway, I think that we, as Slovenian forces, I can say the last 3 years, we are going in proper way, and this is crucial. We are going proper way with money. We are going to pray with proper with documents. We are going proper with all of activities around the regional plans and everything. And of course, we are going proper with recruitment in Slovenian forces. And so I will finish that. We can see our light end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you, General. We can see our light at the end of the tunnel. Last week, one of the politicians said, we see the tunnel at the end of the light as well. Well, our next speaker, I don't have to, he doesn't require our special introduction, but still with us is Supreme Allied Commander Europe, who is at the same time also commander of US European Command. We all know him. Thank you very much for being with us at this occasion, at the 20th anniversary of Slovenian membership in NATO. His CV, if I just mention a couple of things, of course, he was commander at all possible levels, also from battalion, division, and US Army Europe level. He was commander of Regional Command West in Herat, in Afghanistan.
My boss.
And for me, important for me is that he has degrees from Princeton University, also Yale University, and biology, I was taught, and also had fellowships at the George Marshall Center for European Security Studies in Garmisch-Partenkirchen. This is also important for this community here. So, General, the floor is yours. Present challenges with some view of the past as well.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me say what a pleasure it is to be on such a distinguished panel with people I work so closely with. Second, my deepest congratulations to Slovenia for your 20-year anniversary of your joining NATO, which truly is the greatest alliance in the history of humankind. It's a big deal. Robert has pointed out very interestingly that you only spent 13 years. You've spent more time in the alliance as an independent country than out of it, and how things have changed during that period. The NATO that you joined was focused on out-of-area operations, small rotational patterns that were very predictable and produced smallish organizations to go far away and do a specific operation at a time of our choosing. And that's the NATO that Slovenia joined. And Slovenia jumped right in and participated in all of the big out-of-area operations at a very, very high level. As General Glavaš said, the first time we met was in Afghanistan serving together. However, in 2014, as our moderator told us, the bubble of peace in Europe burst. And the alliance very quickly reoriented. And at the Madrid summit, heads of state and government of the members of the alliance instructed SACEUR immediately to implement the strategic approach of deterring and defending the territory of the alliance. And from that time forward, we have been focused primarily, not exclusively, but primarily on reestablishing our ability to conduct collective defense of the territory of the alliance. The first and biggest step in that process was the development of our plans, the functional plans, and critically, the regional plans, which are classic plans for the defense of territory. They assign forces, tasks to perform on specific pieces of geography. And this has been a fundamental change for us. The plans drive so much that will transform the military arm of the alliance, Allied Command Operations. First of all, they produce a force structure requirement. So for years, we've spoken about 2%. For years, people have wondered, is 2% an arbitrary figure? It's no longer a question. We have a specific shopping list of things we must buy or create or establish to be able to execute our plans. Second, we will have new command and control arrangements that will specify and align headquarters with specific parts of geography. Third, we have a new force model. Instead of a rotational, predictable method of force generation, we now have standing readiness at 3 tiers, tier 1, 2, and 3. And this alone has made the forces available to SACEUR in the case of the operation of the plans. We have increased the forces available by more than 700%. And I should thank Italy publicly for your recent commitment of even additional forces to the Allied Reaction Force, which is an external force for out-of-area operations. So we will have a new set of readiness requirements. We will have a new exercise program in which we can rehearse the critical aspects of the plan. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, we will have a new set of authorities that allow the alliance to react speedily and accurately at the time of need. So this is about transforming our alliance from the former model of predictability and small-scale out-of-area operations to large-scale defense of our property, our territory, in all aspects and in all locations, 360 degrees. Again, thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. Oh, thank you. There is an important point that General Glavaš has asked me to make. It's that there are 2 principal aspects to the employment of our defensive forces in the alliance. We all know Article 5. We come to the defense of each other. Article 3 is we are responsible for our own defense. Each nation responsible for its own defense. And I would modestly point out that 3 comes before 5. So this is what all nations in the alliance are now working on. And this is where we are going presently and into the nearest future. Again, it's a pleasure to talk to you today. Congratulations. It's a delight to be back in Slovenia.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Admiral Giuseppe Cavo Dragone, Chief of Defense from Italy. He finished Naval Academy in Livorno, and he was first helicopter pilot, then jet aircraft pilot. He was first pilot on the newborn Italian Navy Harrier Squadron and the first commanding officer there. He was commanding officer at Italian aircraft carrier Giuseppe Garibaldi. He was commander of different levels in Italian staff system, like commander of Italian Joint Special Forces Operation Headquarters, of Italian Joint Operation Headquarters, Chief of the Italian Navy, and so on. He also has a karate black belt, so we feel pretty safe here on this side.
Thank you. This curriculum has been written by my mother, of course. And second, thank you, Chris. I didn't know that we were so good. Thank you. Thank you. Good. Thank you very much to everybody. I'm so glad and so honored to be here in this team. Since I've been trained by the Marine Corps, my is astonishingly brutal English. so I will read, okay? Well, after the Cold War, our alliance was in a period of transition and in deep adaptation. It was trying to redefine its relevance in a changing global security environment. In those years, projecting stability was the core of NATO's strategic agenda, with a particular emphasis on crisis response and global peacekeeping. Even then, however, it was clear that the illusion of a Europe in everlasting peace was beginning to crumble. Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 has harshly revealed the fragility of this vision, calling into question the post-war European order and prompting NATO to rethink its defense and deterrence strategies. Today, we are witnessing the resurgence of numerous conflicts that, with the varying degrees of intensity, threaten the stability of Europe and the West as a whole. Although the international community attention is currently on Russian-Ukrainian war and on a conflict between Israel and Hamas, which epitomize the exacerbation of the continuum of competition between great powers and state or non-state actors, there are further hotbeds of instability that contribute to shake global security and peace. We are witnessing the persistence of two types of conflicts that threaten the alliance border. The first, overt. It's represented by open confrontation on the eastern flank of Europe and in the Middle East. The second is more sneaky and insidious and manifests itself in hybrid disputes among the great powers below the threshold of conflicts. I'm referring to the destabilization campaigns carried out by Russia and China in the Sahel region to influence migration flow and energy supplies to Europe. I also observed the proxy war waged by Iran, which concerned the serious hybrid reverberation of Middle Eastern crisis on the Lebanese, Syrian borders and through the Houthis against trade in the Red Sea. This hybrid threat has extended to the maritime domain, with global effects also on the security of commercial traffic lines through the Bab el-Mandeb International Strait, which represent a strategic artery for trade and the economy throughout Europe. Furthermore, threats on the sea have been overlaid with those related to the underwater dimension, which by its nature lends itself to covert and clandestine operation. In this regard, the recently damaged submarine telecommunication cables in the Red Sea recall the events of the Nord Stream gas pipelines. Also, not to be underestimated, the Arctic race for hegemony over the region trade routes and raw materials, and the dangerous security dilemma triggered by control of the Pacific. In this expanded framework of instability, we are witnessing the obsolescence of classical models of military operations. This has intensified the search for new capabilities for decisive, coordinated, and integrated transversal action, not only in the traditional land, air, and sea domains, but also in the cyberspace, underwater, and cognitive dimensions. The risk of malicious behavior has thus gone beyond the physical boundaries of the battlefield and overlapping with its pervasiveness in the dynamics of a daily life has reached not only individuals but also the decision-maker sphere at all levels. The development of NATO Strategic Concept 2022 marks a remarkable paradigm shift in the alliance approach to global security challenges. In a framework in which the Russian threat is defined as more significant and direct, the risk from terrorist groups as persistent, and China as a source of systemic challenges, NATO must address an increasingly complex, interconnected, and blurred security environments. To meet these challenges, the Alliance has adopted a unified and comprehensive approach, including defense against hybrid threats by strengthening global partnership. The three core tasks that underpin the Alliance's new strategy, deterrence and defense, crisis prevention and management, and cooperative security are now at service of collective defense, which remains the keystone of the latest strategic concept. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. For those of you who don't know, Admiral will be new chairman of NATO Military Committee. Okay, and our next speaker is General Rudolf Striedinger, Austria's Chief of Defense Staff. Now, again, he carried out all different commanding missions in Austrian armed forces, among them commanding officer of EUFOR Altea, among them Chief of Staff of the Federal Minister of Defense, also Director of Armed Forces Security Agency, Counterintelligence, and the Deputy Chief of Defense Staff. So, General, how do you see the present challenges and the past transformations from the perspective of a partner and a neighboring country of Slovenia?
Thank you. Admiral, Generals, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank you, Robert, for inviting me to this distinguished audience and the possibility to share with you Austrian views on working together with NATO. Not on NATO, but on working together. I may have to make a point out of that. And it is an honor for me to be here. And I do that because all of these generals and admirals are good friends of mine, and it's good to have them again and the possibility to talk with them. And as I mentioned, Austria is a neutral country, and I want to go a little bit back into the history. Why are we neutral? After the Second World War, Austria was occupied by 4 winning nations, I would say, and we were occupied for 10 years. And in 1955, we got our freedom, and this freedom was a little bit linked to our neutrality. And if you think back at that time, on the western side we had NATO, and on the eastern side we had the Warsaw Pact, and Austria was a little bit in the middle of these 2 blocks. And during the following years we prepared our defense into more or less officially all directions, especially into the east, of course. And after the end of the Cold War in 1989, also our strategic situation changed step by step, not immediately, but step by step. I only have to think about 1991 at our southern border, for example, where we had a war. In 1995, Austria joined the European Union, and by that our neutrality changed a lot. We had the neutrality according to Switzerland, but we have now a situation where neutrality is overruled by European Council decisions. And that is a very important point, and we have that, for example, concerning our support for Ukraine, that even if some country is in war against another, we have the possibility to support one of the both according to the decisions of the European Council. In 1995, we also joined the Partnership for Peace program of NATO, which is very important for us. And the aim of it is reaching interoperability by standardization. And what we, since then, are focusing on is working together in exercises, working together on missions. And in 2015, we also entered a special group of partners called Partner Interoperability Advocacy Group, where we had 7 non-NATO members in it. At present, there are 5 because Sweden and Finland left this group because of joining NATO. But these 5 are, beside Austria, Switzerland, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. And what we focus on is exchanging information and getting by that even better knowledge and understanding of each other. We, Austria, were the first nation to finalize the individually tailored partnership program with NATO. And the aim of this partnership is NATO and Austria foster political dialogue and practical cooperation with a view to the promotion of international peace and security. Secondly, the Austrian armed forces are effectively and interoperable with those of NATO. And third, NATO and Austria cooperate to address the full range of current and future common security challenges. And we are very proud to be part of this close cooperation with NATO. And by that we are also able to cooperate in missions abroad, for example, KFOR in the Kosovo, or now we are starting to participate in the NATO mission in Iraq. And we, of course, participate in this regional cooperation as we have with the Defense Cooperation Initiative under the guideline or leadership of Italy, and being part of a lot of countries around the Western Balkans. For us, as Austria, NATO is the security provider for Europe to defend the continent. And from my point of view, beside the things I already mentioned, the most important thing is to provide military mobility, because Austria is more or less lying in the middle of the continent. And if you go shift troops from east to west, for example, or from south to north, you will cross Austria more or less. And therefore, we want to make sure that this transition through Austria is a transition in a protected area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General. So now we have the first round of the questions. But before we go to the second round of the question, which is about the future, I would still like to stick with one issue, one present challenge, and this is war in Ukraine. Now, you know that this has become a war of attrition, basically. We are looking for old armaments, all ammunition in our depots. We are seeing that dynamics of war has stopped there to a certain extent. And we see that actually different techniques are used there. Like the war has become, in one sense, like World War I. And on the other hand, we are seeing application of artificial intelligence, especially on the side of Ukrainians. So my question is, and also drones, unexpectedly to some, but the use of drones is huge there. Even platoon sometimes doesn't move without the drone coverage. So my question is now a little bit more technical. How do you see the events in Ukraine? How do you see this attrition, this issue of attrition as a challenge? And then we go to the future.
It's working here. When we, in military, in our general staff discussion with Ukraine and related to war there, for me it's very simple. This is a First World War system, how to fight. Bunkers, obstacles, minefield. So, and this moment, it's like in chess when you play, pet situation. And this is a crucial, how and when will be willingness to sit together and discuss about future of Ukraine, and this is a crucial. But anyway, I would like to mention something more. Slovenia and Slovenian armed forces definitely support Ukraine from very early stage of war in Ukraine land. we send, and we will continue this military support, political support, and all of support as we thinking about. So we sent a lot of materials. We sent, as you mentioned, drones. We sent tanks. We sent infantry fighting vehicles, gasoline, ammunition, and something like that. And as I mentioned, we will continue to support Ukraine for its fight against Russian aggression. We were in the same situation in 1991, but we didn't have so many supporters to support us that time with ammunition, with new equipment, with new rifles and everything. And everybody who was 1991 inside of territorial defense units or volunteer, they can confirm this. We today send to Ukraine a lot of materials to help him. Is this enough? I don't know. Do we continue? Probably the question is our military industry. If it's this military industry in Europe or wider, they have capabilities and capacities to produce so many thousands, millions of rounds, ammos, vehicles, and everything. This is the question, and this is a definitely problem. And of course, we as Slovenia per capita, we can say that we are top on countries what we send with ammunition, with everything. So, and I don't see in the future, very close future, I would say like this, end of this war, because we didn't start to negotiation, we didn't start to thinking that Ukraine will be inside of previous borders, not as today. So, and when will be this? I don't have magic ball to say this will be tomorrow, or next year, or after 10 years. I don't know. Probably my colleagues from left side they mentioned something more, because secure. I know that he is very watching all of this in Ukraine, and he can say, or they can explain something more than we. Thank you.
When we think about the war in Ukraine, I think the most important observation we can make is about the scale of the war and what it takes truly to defend a country against a determined attacker. The scale of the war is extraordinary. There are well over 400,000 Russian troops inside Ukraine. For reference, the American army is 450,000. The Russians have lost 2,500 tanks. For reference, we have 7 countries in the alliance that have 0 tanks. Major allies have about 200 tanks. There are only a couple of allies with thousands of tanks. The scale of the war is tremendous. It's necessary to understand that to defend ourselves individually and to defend all of each other collectively, there is a significant amount of stuff that we have to possess, to include soldiers under arms. This is a challenge across the alliance, and it's a challenge we must rise to. But this question of scale, I think, is the most important thing we can grapple with.
Thank you. From my perspective, one of the first things we should do is just try to properly counteract the malign narrative that Russia is putting in a game. Now is a static. Maybe what was the counteroffensive, summer counteroffensive from Ukraine is counterbalanced by the small gains that Russia is achieving now. But at the end of the story, the main strategic goals that Putin had at the very beginning were not achieved. I mean, he was thinking about a 4 days blitzkrieg, I think. I mean, we are there after 2 years, almost 2 years. Russia fleet is out of Black Sea because they are going to get a lot of losses, unexpected, but a lot of good losses. Maybe now at this stage, time is on Putin's side, but at this stage. On the other side, what I feel, and we should try to again counteract this, the public opinions is fading out because too many months. Sometimes the sanctions are also sometimes affecting their own nation who are putting them in place. But again, we need to keep the fire burning. We need to do more and more to provide stuff, materials to Ukraine. We cannot leave them alone now. The effort is, I mean, psychologically and effectively harder than before, but we need, as an alliance, really be strong. Another thing that Mr. Putin just failed is that he wanted to demonstrate that after what happened in Afghanistan, the alliance was weak, was far apart from each other. That was totally the contrary. We were all together. We timely reacted. When the tanks, the Russian tanks crossed the border of Ukraine, we were 30 in NATO. Now we are 32. So I mean, that's something that need to be highlighted, need to be spread, need to be given to the public opinion, because this is something that means something that need to keep our will and our strong will to support Ukraine alive and just again do probably something more as a contact group or NATO or whatever, call it the way you want it, but Western country, I mean international community, to stay with them and not leave them alone now.
You know, our neutral status makes it very clear that we support Ukraine in a special way, not in a military, but in a humanitarian way, with a lot of money and a lot of other support. And by that, we make sure that we are also a contributor to support Ukraine. When I take a look at the kind of war, then of course I agree to Robert that some parts of this war are more or less the old war. But there are also some aspects which are war, the kind of war which shows us a little bit the future. When I look what's going on with drones, when they use artificial intelligence, for example, hypersonic missiles, etc. And I had a talk with one of my comrades last month, and we were discussing how our armed forces are prepared for war. And he said, if you are not prepared for war, you must prepare your troops for the next war. And if you are prepared for the next war, then you can prepare for the future. And our answer for that is, no, we have to do both. Because the Austrian armed forces were reduced during the last 30 years and concentrated on doing missions abroad, but not doing military national defense. And now, even before the Ukraine war started, we changed our attitude and said, okay, the situation is going to deteriorate and therefore it's necessary to concentrate on national defense again. And by that we started to build up our armed forces, and I think I'm more or less one of the only chiefs of defense in Europe who can say that within 5 years the budget for the military will be doubled, which is quite a lot, I would say. And that's what we are doing to make sure that we increase our capability to defend our country and by that support the European security. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the time is to open the last round, and it's about future. So the question is for Admiral and Generals, how do they see the future? You don't have to reveal all the scenarios, of course, but and I also am asking you to finish with some positive thoughts as well. And what would be your recommendation to avoid the worst case? Your thoughts.
I was thinking that I was be last, but anyway, from my point of view, definitely based on all of informations, discussion, and everything, definitely alliance and all of countries at this moment are facing with the major changes and challenges. This is a fact. So new technological era, raising new powers around the globe, terrorism, asymmetric warfare, what else? Trans-criminal organizations, new technological means in military purpose. So this is the challenges for all of us. So my question is here, are we ready? And first, recognize all of these challenges, threats, and how we will handle it with this. Of course, from NATO purpose, NATO side, we have new information, we have new strategic concepts, we have regional plans, but the question is this enough? What we as a nations, what we need to do, that tomorrow we will not have surprise? And this is the question. And of course, I can say in our country, in our Minister of Defense, we have serious debate about this. And I think that we need to be very positive. Alliance is here, and this is a fact. We need to be strong, we need to be together, and definitely with cohesion in alliance, with interoperability, as we say, we will survive and we will be better and better and better. And then we can say, look at, we are here and we can respond for every ways and every threats in the globe. And this is very simple. So question is, do or if we are ready for this business. Very simple. Thank you.
The future, to me, is very clear. We have challenges today. We'll have challenges tomorrow. But when, in my opening remarks, I described this as the greatest alliance in the history of the world, it is because we know how to overcome challenges. We have always done that. We have had many challenges in our history, and we'll have many more in the future. But the fact is, we have always come together, and we have always surmounted those challenges, and we've done it together. My view of the future, my prediction, is that this alliance will be larger, this alliance will be more unified, and this alliance will be securing the liberty and the freedoms and the prosperity of more than 1 billion people long past my passing from this earth.
With the summit of June 2022, a new force model has been adopted to strengthen and modernize our defense structure, making it more responsive to the Alliance's fundamental strategic missions and to the challenges of the future. It marked a profound chance for the Alliance, who felt the need to adjust its means and capabilities to fit better the incoming threats. However, while NATO continued to strengthen its military presence in Eastern Europe in response to Russian threat, it cannot afford to be distracted from the challenges coming from its southern flank. The Alliance's southern flank, stretching from North Africa and Sahel to the Balkans and the Middle East, reveals numerous and growing vulnerabilities that Russia and China are systematically exploiting in their strategic competition. The presence of malign actors in the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and Europe's closest neighborhood poses a significant challenge to the alliance's security. It requires a holistic response that integrates military defense with political, economic, and security initiative. In this context, NATO must continue to invest in its cyber and space capabilities, in the projection of critical infrastructure, including underwater ones, and countering threats in the cognitive dimensions, in order to mitigate actions that challenge the stability of our society from within and without. Education and training will be the key elements in strengthening the resilience of partner population and institution. This implies continuous upgrading of skills and technologies, as well as close cooperation with the research centers and industry to anticipate and neutralize threats before they occur. Moreover, the unexpected return to the risk of conventional warfare, combined with the diverse nature of today's provocations, has made a step change in the productivity of defense industrial sector imperative. We need a better capability to deliver weapon systems that can ensure the sustainability and resilience of the military component. I believe it is vital that NATO continues to maintain a balanced engagement in all directions, recognizing both the importance of ensuring the security of our territory and promoting stability in our neighboring regions. Partnership are and will remain a fundamental pillar of our strategy, through which we can extend our influence and promote the values of peace and security around the world. The alliance must remain vigilant and flexible, ready to respond to rapidly evolving scenarios. Our ability to positively influence regional processes will depend on our capacity to adapt and anticipate challenges, while maintaining an open and constructive dialogue with all involved actors. Only in this way we will be able to a safer and more peaceful future, in line with the principles of freedom and democracy that constitute our foundation.
From my point of view, our utmost aim should be that Europe and the European continent has to be so strong military and politically and in the economic way that it doesn't make sense to attack Europe. And from my point of view, every European country has to take its part and to provide whatever could be possible to make sure that the overall result is that we can live in a secure freedom and stability also in the future. For Austria, it means that we rely on the working together closely within the European Union, and as I already said, what we really need is a decision of the European Council to make sure that we are also allowed to support, for example, NATO, for example, by crossing Europe, because we need this common security and defense policy decisions of the European Council. And by that, our task is to make sure that we not only do that what the NATO Article 3 regulations say, defend yourself. Of course, that's normal for a neutral country, and we should provide that. But also make clear that we also are in the European Union and have the obligation to support every European Union country if they are attacked in the way as we are able and possible to do it. And I'm very sure that working together in our organization and in our partnership between NATO, EU and NATO and the different countries, that will be the future and that will help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have just, we have a luxury right now for one question, maybe two, but depends on the first question. So would anyone like to pose a question to our guests? Okay, I will not ask again. Yeah. So just to sum up, well, first, thank you for all your remarks on challenges, on your thoughts, also your thoughts on future. Very interesting, also sobering, and thank you for your optimistic and positive tone. This is what we need from generals and admirals in these times. Just to sum up, two or three interesting thoughts. We need to stay positive. We need to keep the spirit of solidarity. Alliance knows how to overcome challenges, and it will overcome its future challenges. And we need to keep, we need to maintain holistic approach towards threats, holistic approach towards how should I say, towards our responses, and towards partnerships, and geographically as well. So with this in mind, we are finishing this panel. Generals and Admiral, thank you again for your presence. And we have now 15 minutes and we begin another panel. Thank you very much.
We would need some brave men here in the front. Some brave men in the front. And women, of course. Yes. So, thank you all for being here. My name is Andrej Benedejčić, and I'm the ambassador of Slovenia to NATO in Brussels. And I'm extremely glad that we have gathered here on the occasion of also this panel. Together with me is the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign and European Affairs of the Republic of Slovenia, Ms. Tanja Fajon. Also here with us is the Secretary General of NATO's Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security, Ms. Irene Ferlin. Also with us is the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Sweden and the current chair of the Memorial Foundation of Ann Linde, that's Anna Linde. And also Professor Dr. Ljubica Jelušić, who is not only a full professor at the Ljubljana University, but also our first former Minister of Defense. So welcome to you all. And this panel will be devoted to the issue of women, peace and security with a view to approaching the summit in Washington. Let me say that I'm extremely glad that we are discussing this particular issue because it goes to the core of what NATO is really about. And NATO is about our values. The alliance exists to defend our way of life. And this political nature of the military alliance, which is a political military alliance, is also inscribed, as many of you know, in the motto of the North Atlantic Council itself, which is animus in consulendo liber, meaning free minds in a free discussion. So democracy and the defense of democratic way of life and civil liberties is essential to NATO. And that is also why we're celebrating its 75th anniversary, because otherwise, as a purely military alliance, it is really doubtful if NATO would have survived as such. But because it is a political military alliance, it is extremely important that we also remember what is it that it is all about. And the issue of women, peace and security really cuts to the core of the fundamental values that we are also promoting in our work at NATO. I would like to say that this issue that we're discussing here is actually a cross-cutting issue in the sense that it does not only affect NATO's recent history and activities, but also the recent history of Slovenia as a country, as a state. As you know, we became independent in 1991 on the basis of the democratic processes which really took off in the 1980s. And part of those processes were also extremely strong currents as far as women's rights are concerned. In 1991, after our independence, the events in the former Yugoslavia went in a direction that we're all familiar with, to the point that the events in the Western Balkans were also one of the reasons why in 2000 the United Nations Security Council actually adopted the resolution 1325, which will be also marking a quarter of a century of next year. And that resolution basically addressed also some of the things that happened in our nearby neighborhood, also when it comes to violence against women, also when it comes to some of the other aspects of that conflict that many of us are quite familiar with. And that is how the Women, Peace and Security agenda was launched, to make sure that when we approach the issue of security, we always also have a gender perspective and also take into account also issues that relate to women and girls. And that is why we talk about 4 pillars of Women, Peace and Security agenda: prevention, protection, participation, also post-conflict rehabilitation and reconstruction. Officially, NATO became even more engaged in promoting this issue in 2012 when it for the first time appointed a special representative on women, peace and security. But even before that, the alliance became aware of the fact that, especially in its expeditionary mode in Afghanistan, it was essential also to have this gender lens, also when it comes purely to operational effectiveness on the ground. In that sense, it was extremely important to also have female soldiers on the ground, especially when conducting searches, when being in touch and having contacts with the female population in Afghanistan. And in that sense, this is also one of the reasons why mainstreaming of this issue at the very beginning within the alliance took off quite quickly, and it was also accepted precisely from the point of view of operational effectiveness. But today we find ourselves in a new environment, in an environment characterized by a conflict with the Russian Federation, which is taking on more and more, our confrontation, I would say, with the Russian Federation, which is taking on more and more also the nature of a clash of values. And in that sense, the promotion of the Women, Peace and Security agenda is important also in the sense of staking fundamentally, in a fundamental way, also the reasons why we are who we are and why we defend those and help those who are defending themselves against Russian aggression. I think that it is also in that sense that one should understand why the new strategic concept, which was adopted in 2022 after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, actually highlights the Women, Peace and Security agenda quite prominently, and it also talks about its mainstreaming in all of the 3 core tasks of the alliance's work. In that sense, it is also not surprising that at NATO there is ongoing work on the new NATO WPS policy with a view of its formal adoption at the forthcoming Washington summit this July. So with that, I would like to turn to our speakers. Let me first turn to our Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign and European Affairs. Ms. Tanja Fajon has been engaged on the issue of women, peace and security quite prominently. As you know, 2 years ago when she took office, she also declared that feminist foreign policy is an integral part of Slovenian foreign policy. And this is also on the basis of her work in the European Parliament, which has served for 2 terms from 2009 to 2019. And today she has also a very interesting position to be able to mainstream this particular approach on a global scale because, as you know, Slovenia is a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council since the beginning of January. So with that, Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you, Dr. Andrej Benedejčić, for this nice introduction. I think this is a very exclusive panel, having 4 ladies at the panel, and you are very brave to lead us through this discussion. But I want to say first that I very much admire and feel very honored to discuss with all 4 ladies that I know through my political career for quite a long while, and we often meet, and from different perspectives, we have the same goal. And this is how to encourage the policy agenda when it comes to empowerment of women, of girls, how to boost the agenda of women policy, peace, security, and we are all actually very united in these goals. But allow me first to give a little bit a general analysis of the situation where we are today when we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of Slovenia in NATO alliance. As you said, we share our values, values of peace, stability, security, also democracy, the rule of law, solidarity. And this is very important, women, peace, security agenda. And when we look that we have more and more armed conflicts around us, having 3rd year of brutal Russian aggression in Ukraine, having the serious conflicts and the war in Gaza, in Middle East, and the instability that we face also in our direct neighborhood, where we face 20, 30 years bloody wars in our history, I mean the Western Balkans, we need this partnership and we need this alliance even more than ever. And we see it, it's enlarging. But just looking how many women and girls in these conflicts also lose their lives. Just in Gaza, we have number 10,000 women that lost their lives. And if this, from the beginning of October, if this continues with this speed, it means 63 women per day lose their life. Among those are around 37 mothers. There is acute famine, and many of these women are suffering poverty, famine, lack of medicines. And when we are talking about how to bring collective security and what we can do together to ensure also the peace and stability and empowerment of women and girls, we have to address all what is going around us. And this is current situation, and I very much encourage also through NATO, through our alliance, Women, Peace and Security agenda. Not only through NATO, we do the same in Security Council now, being a non-permanent member of Security Council. I think this is very important. And you mentioned at the beginning, when I took over the ministry, I was the first female foreign minister in the history of our country, and we saw some changes also in our country on the positions of the President of the Republic. We have our former defense minister. We have in leading positions in the country and the Speaker of the Parliament, quite some women. But what I wanted to see is that we are really addressing, when it comes to foreign policy, the aspect of how to improve or empower women and girls, or when it comes to, on one hand, the decision-making process. So we have to bring more women in a decision-making process on all levels, and we are all trying to do that. And on the other hand, we speak about accountability too. That means accountability for gender-based violence, sex violence. So we have so many aspects to address. And when I entered to first NATO ministerials, I do remember when female foreign ministers really embraced me. We are a minority number. But we created a very important online platform on a feminist network foreign policy, together to address the situation of what is happening with women in conflicts, with girls in conflicts, how to empower them, how to bring them in a decision-making process or in negotiations or mediations where we lack them, but they bring the best results. So we created this online platform, and I can tell you that we are really participating and cooperating quite a lot. Through all our different instances, we are discussing about the conflicts around us and how really to give different voices to women in need. I will give you one experience I had recently, and it really touched me. I invited in Slovenia, and for that reason I also very much welcome new approach of Irene with a women, peace, security agenda, having a new strong connection with the civil society, because I think this is very important also at our work. I brought to Slovenia 2 women organizations from Israel in Palestine. These women are working together today, and they are having a loud activist voice for peace in Middle East. But they are calling for peace as mothers. And they gave us a very strong message. We don't want to blame each other. We don't want to see back what was wrong in our history. Our message is for our future generation and for our children. We want to have peace. And also why I say that this angle that you are addressing now, and we will talk next week at the ministerial NATO meeting, to have a link with the civil society and engage it, and engage also women, mothers, girls, it's extremely important. So whatever we can contribute, also in this soft power of our alliance, this is very important, we'll continue doing so.
Thank you, Madam Minister. And I think it is extremely important what you said also about Slovenian engagement when it comes to the situation in Gaza. Also, the recent resolution of the UN Security Council calling for ceasefire was very much work of the Slovenian Foreign Ministry and of you personally. Congratulations for that also, because even though NATO is perceived to be mostly hard security, NATO was always conscious of the importance of strategic communications, or STRATCOM as we call it. And in that sense, also within the discussions in the alliance, there are more and more allies who are pointing out the fact that the situation in Gaza is affecting also our image in the global south. And our image in the global south, also as the collective West, is important when it comes to Ukraine. In that sense, the issue of Gaza does have more to do with Ukraine than we think, and initiatives like that then also help in addressing this particular issue. But speaking of Ukraine, I mentioned before that the position of the special representative of the NATO Secretary General for Women, Peace and Security was created 12 years ago. That was at the time when NATO was still in very much in an expeditionary mode, when we were talking about maintaining our ability to work together so that we can fight together either in the high north or in the tropics. Now we are in a different reality. And when we talk about ensuring that the WPS agenda is applied in all the core functions of the alliance, deterrence and defense, crisis prevention and management, and also cooperative security, we are actually now more focusing on the first core task, which is deterrence and defense. That, of course, also presents challenges for the NATO Special Representative on WPS. And in that sense, of course, Mr. Reinfeldt, we are very much interested also in your thoughts. Please.
Thank you very much. And thank you, first of all, for the invitation. Looking at my calendar, I realized that I was here exactly 1 year ago in my first visit to Slovenia. We had the possibility to talk. It was a very important conversation about civil society that we had, among other things. I will come back to that. So happy to be here today, and extremely interested in seeing how you set the priorities when it comes to celebrating the 20 years of Slovenia to NATO, bringing this topic into the as a panel today, which is something that doesn't happen enough, I would say. It's easier to have dedicated events to women, peace and security or gender issues, but the mainstreaming, bringing these issues as part of the core of our work and activity is something that we still struggle, I still struggle to see. So thank you for leading on that. Thank you to you and to the organization. As you mentioned, those are days of celebration. Next week, we will have the foreign ministerial during the days of the 75th anniversary since the establishment of NATO. We will have the real big celebration in Washington later this year. But the right days are to next week and then the 20th anniversary. And it's important because, as you mentioned in your introduction, it's important to remember why are we together and what are we celebrating. We are together because of our values, rule of law, democracy. And I cannot imagine a better agenda and a topic that can bring all these values together than the Women, Peace and Security agenda. When I started my mandate 2 years ago, it was a few months before the Alliance endorsed the new strategic concept in Madrid. And this is for the first time, we could collectively, me and the Alliance, working together to make sure that the reference to the importance of women, peace and security was included in the strategic concept. The strategic concept is the main document providing the vision of the Alliance and it lasts a decade. So I came and I told myself, if you miss this opportunity to inject a reference in the main document, you can go home immediately, because how can I continue my work without having NATO fully convinced on the importance of this topic? But beyond the reference to the importance of mainstreaming women, peace and security across the core task, we reference this as part of our values. We reference advancing the gender equality as a reflection of our core values. And this is who we are, this is our DNA, and this is why we are together, and we are expanding as an alliance, because we are more and more sharing the same values. And then so extremely happy to be here with Anlind, and that since 3 weeks, new member, new allied at NATO. And this is the values that then we translate into actions. And it's protecting ourselves, working on or alliance stability, on regional stabilities, and supporting ourselves. And this is a key role that Slovenia is doing in the neighborhood, in the region, but also in the bilateral support to Ukraine. And this is extremely important to look at this. Coming to what I do at NATO, I would like to use this opportunity to highlight 3 dimensions for the current war. One is the new Women, Peace and Security agenda. The second is engaging with civil society, an important area that I already mentioned, and the specific work that we are trying to do with Ukraine. When people ask me what I do, what is my job, sometimes I find it difficult to explain. A lot is about, because it's a lot about values, commitments, but then it's difficult to translate this into actions. So what I do mainly is to work on a policy framework. It's trying to make the agenda understandable and translating this into actions for the military side mainly. The famous so what for the military. So we all agree on the principle, but then I know that many of the colleagues here in the room would say, okay, but then what does this mean for me? How do I translate this into an action? So we start from a policy, and then we translate this into an action plan. So in these days, we negotiated the new policy. This will be endorsed in Washington at the highest level by head of state and government, showing the importance, the real political commitment to this topic. How did I approach this? I approached this being a translation of the strategic concept throughout a gender lens. What does this mean? Is starting from the current strategic environment, moving from a crisis management posture, so looking outside of our area of responsibility, from there into looking inside. What does this mean for the alliance? Integrating women, peace and security and the gender perspective in our core task. Deterrence and defense, crisis prevention and management, and cooperative security. Everything that the alliance does needs to have a gender perspective. Then, how do we do this is how now we will move in the next step after Washington in revising our action plan and make this, translate this into concrete actions. Part of something new that came into in this policy is first the change of the strategic concept. The other is going back to the core pillars of the resolution 1325 that Andre mentioned at the beginning, so the participation, the importance of the participation of women, protection and prevention. So from conflict-related sexual violence, protection of women and girls, especially in conflict, and the role that women can play when it comes to prevent conflict themselves. And another element I decided to add, because I think it's extremely important, is the role of leadership, is emphasizing the gender-responsive leadership. Very often this agenda has been associated to the role of women, which is promoting the role of women, yes. But if we want to our leaders accountable. We want both men and women to be equally responsible for the implementation of this agenda. We cannot limit this to women, especially because we don't have enough women in leadership position yet. So if we keep this responsibility to us only, we will never see this agenda fully implemented. This is the main strategic objective, sharing this burden here, starting at home, in our work, and especially from our leaders. The second dimension I would like to answer that is also emphasized in the policy is the importance of engaging with civil society. This agenda comes from the grassroots. It comes from civil society. It is thanks to the movement on women's organization in the 90s and in the year 2000, the agenda came at the table of the Security Council. And this is why, for me, it is extremely important to maintain this strong bond with civil society, because otherwise we will lose the reason why we are doing what we are doing. And I do this in several ways, but I want to mention one tool that I have, because which is the Civil Society Advisory Panel, and I mention this because I'm glad, because one of the members, the Slovenian member, is sitting in this panel here with me. This is an informal consultative body that the special representative has to maintain a dialogue open with a representative from civil society. I relaunched this. We had this conversation last year on the importance of relaunching this, and we had the first meeting in January this year. But then it will last for 3 years, accompanying my work at NATO. But with civil society, I also work a lot in Ukraine, and this is my last point. How do we translate these agendas and this commitment concretely in what is the core business of the alliance? I kept engaging with a different level in the past 2 years with civil society, parliamentarian ministers. But now it's about the needs. A lot has been on the focus on the needs of women in the armed forces there. We saw an unprecedented increase of presence of women in the armed forces in Ukraine, something I think that none of our countries ever experienced in the history. Now, the question was, were the armed forces in Ukraine ready to absorb? They were not entirely. So I was in Ukraine 3 weeks ago, and I could talk again and see during my trip what is the impact that the war is having on the whole society. And in our response and support to Ukraine, we need to have a whole society approach. What do women need there in the different role they are playing, starting from their role in the armed forces, but then what it will entail for them being actively fighting and coming back tomorrow. Today, what they need primarily is uniform. Women are fighting and without having uniform tailor-made for their bodies, without having bulletproof vests. So one of the projects I'm following now is to see how throughout our comprehensive assistance package allies can fund uniform for women, supporting an NGO that is called Armed Women Now, that had already designed and produced uniform for them. Another aspect that is extremely important is to look at the cycle of the role of women in fighting, and is the role of the veteran. We don't need to wait that the war is over to address this problem. We need to learn from the past experience. We need to learn how the reintegration of the armed forces is, and the fact that women are always left behind. So we are ready to do things in a different way today. So a lot of the conversation is how, so it will be in the next month, how to support Ukraine in having this approach, that it will be a gender approach to the veterans, and making sure that women will be reintegrated and their needs will be addressed in the two ways, being the veterans themselves or being caregivers. The Ukrainian society will be entirely a society of veterans in one way or the other. And in our support to them, we need to take this in consideration. So looking forward, those are my priorities. I intend to bring them to the summit in Washington for having a conversation at the highest level and to continue supporting them in the months to come.
Thank you so much for these thoughts. You mentioned also Ukraine at the end. Of course, Ukraine and the Russian invasion of Ukraine has affected the North Atlantic Treaty Alliance quite to a great extent. Also, when it comes to the fact that there are now 32 of us. As you know, as of the beginning of this month, the Swedish flag also flies in front of the NATO headquarters in Brussels. So it gives me a particular pleasure to welcome Ms. Ann Linde to be here with us, also because the entrance of Sweden into the alliance means that we are now together in the alliance with the originators of the feminist foreign policy. You launched this initiative in 2014. I was working at the OSCE together with your ambassador there in 2018 in the Troika of the Forum for Security Cooperation. So I learned about the 3 R's, about your emphasis on the rights, on representation, and on resources. And you yourself then, as the chairperson of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe in 2021, were doing your best, basically also to convince the Russian side to take the off-ramp and also to mainstream this particular perspective within this biggest regional security organization. So without further ado, I would let me say that I'm extremely glad that you're here with us, not only because you come from Sweden, but also because you bring specific and very important knowledge to this discussion. The floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, it's a special pleasure to be here as a full member of NATO. In the 90s, I was advisor to the Minister of Defense in Sweden, and it was rather controversial when Sweden wanted to be a member of Partnership for Peace. And all the relations we had with NATO that we thought we need to get closer. And then so many years after, we finally, after the full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine, we changed our policy after 200 years of successfully keeping our country out of war. Not easy, not always beautiful, but very effective. And if you have to change 200 years of successful neutrality, alliance, military non-alliance to something new that you don't know what that will mean for Sweden, that was not easy. But anyway, I signed the application to become a member, and after 2 years of not so very easy discussions with some partners, we are now fully members. I'm very, very happy for that. And just as both Tanja and Irene have said, the situation right now is very, very grave with the urgent crisis in Ukraine and in the war with Israel and Hamas. And women are actually affected always in a very, very strong way. Like the displaced women in Ukraine is nearly 60%. I also was in New York 2 weeks ago where we had a special seminar on how the conflict in Mali is affecting women. And you could see that the wars and conflicts affect women not only in sexual violence, but also because educational system, welfare system, all of those authorities that is taking care of children and women are being hit. I mean, they actually are destroyed. And that means that women are hit in ways that we don't see. So in all situations of war and conflict, the women and children are hit the most. And that is why the Women, Peace and Security agenda is more important and relevant than ever. And we need to move from just talking about this to action. The first step, I think, is to recognizing the importance of actively addressing the gender issues when we talk about defense and security. And it boils down to this: get women in the room, in the peace negotiation, in the open channels, in the back channels, and don't have gender issue as a separate agenda. Just like Irene said, I'm so happy that Tanja and everybody who has organized this celebration put Women, Peace and Security as one part of it and not a separate conference on it. women are chronically underrepresented in key forums where decisions on disarmament and non-proliferation are made. And we lose important perspectives when women are not in the room. Another important issue is that if women are not in the room when you try to solve the conflict, when you try to negotiate peace agreements, crimes like rape will not be considered a part of the agreement, and that will not be asking for accountability. It will be seen as ordinary crimes and not as war crime. And we know that rape is used as a terrible tool in wars and conflicts. And we now know also that, for example, Hamas used systematically sexual violence towards the women on the 7th of October in a report by UN. You mentioned already the rights representation and resources. And that is a way of working that we started in Sweden when we started a feminist foreign policy. I have to say the new government has not followed through with the feminist foreign policy, but after 8 years of feminist foreign policy, there is now 19 governments around the world who has a feminist foreign policy, like Spain, Germany, France, Mexico, Canada, Luxembourg. Well, it's many countries, Netherlands, and so on and so forth. What we mean with this is that we should always see the rights. The conflicts affects group disproportionately, and we should always see what are the rights of the women in here. But when it comes to highlight the issues of power, cultural expectation, division of labor, family issues, and so on. The representation is, of course, that you should have always women represented in peace negotiation and so on. I can take a concrete example here. It was when Sweden hosted the first and unfortunately so far the only peace talks in Yemen. And the talks were held outside Stockholm in a big castle, far away from everything. And we asked both the rebels and the government to bring women in the delegation, and among all participants, they brought one woman. So what we did was that we invited women both from the rebels, the Houthi rebels, and the government, and then we put them in that castle. So in the lunch and dinner and breakfast and in the corridors, there were the Yemeniti women. And I spoke on behalf of EU when I was foreign minister on Yemen. And I was in Yemen a couple of times. And I know how much the women has to contribute to. And that agreement is still the only peace agreement that is existing in Yemen. We are also in Sweden proud to host the NATO-certified Nordic Center for Gender in Military Operations. And that is a center that enables actors to apply gender perspective to every situation. It collaborates very closely to countries and organizations around the world. And now when we have become full members of NATO, we hope that that will be even more important. And I actually used that center when I was chair of OSCE in 2021. Because we had, of course, a feminist foreign policy then as well. And every year there is a meeting with all military advisors in each of the 57 countries. And I decided that this year we should be at the Nordic Center for Gender and Military Operations. Some of the military advisors thought this was crazy. Some of them said we don't come because this is not important. But after spending nearly 3 days in the center, they actually came to me afterwards, some of those representatives from the countries, and said, we have learned a lot. And that is not the least that you have to have a gender analysis for all missions. Because if you don't see that there is a gender perspective, then there could be something very positive for your enemy. Just two very short examples. in Africa, in one of the conflicts of the big seas, there was not a gender analysis, and they didn't see that women were going to fountains to collect water alone. And some of the first times in the conflict, the rebels were standing around the fountains where the water was collected, and they raped the women. And not only did they rape the women, they cut off one ear after they have raped the women. So when they went back to the village, they were pushed out. And this is my former colleague in the government, who was Assistant Secretary General in United Nations UN Women, who was there and met these women with only one ear. Had they had a gender analysis, this would probably not have happened. And another issue is, of course, when you have a body search to get into camps. If you are in a Muslim country, this will be very, very difficult if you don't have made an analysis on how to deal with that situation. At the chairpersonship, I also started a special representative for gender and an advisor group on gender to advise OSCE. I also demanded from the 15 leaders of the OSCE missions, and there was 1 woman and 14 men as leaders of the mission, to have in their report a gender analysis. And actually, they didn't react negatively. They did it, and I think that hopefully there was some learning to do, and hopefully it continues in a good way. Finally, I will just say that now Slovenia is a very successful member of the Security Council, and I'm so happy that Tanja and Slovenia has also followed suit of what we did when we were member of the Security Council in 2017 and 2018. Because we had a very clear perspective that on all briefings there should be civil society representatives and women. And first it was the normal, there are no women, and there is always women. So if you just demand that there should be a briefer who is a woman, then you find it. It's not difficult. And also we insisted to have gender perspective, including information on women's role in the different peace discussions, the different agreements that should be taken by the Security Council, and never ever be without a gender perspective in this. And that has, I think, also changed the way of thinking for many. And actually, the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is a champion of this. He talks about this a lot, and I think that's very good. So by that, I would just say that I very, very much hope that Sweden will use these experiences when we are now a full-fledged member of NATO. And I'm so happy to be able to say to all of those women organizations who said that when we become a member of NATO, we will not be able to continue to be the most gender equal society in the world, which we are now, because we will not be allowed to push for women, peace and security agenda. And I am clearly sure that the answer to that question is yes, we will be able to continue to lead issues of women, peace and security, also as full-fledged member of NATO. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Linde. And since the strongest NATO coordination outside of Brussels exists in Vienna, you, by mainstreaming this particular agenda, also during your chairmanship, basically already contributed to mainstreaming within NATO. So thank you for that. Many of the 57 military advisors that you mentioned are also members of a NATO country. But while thinking globally, we should also act locally, and in that sense, the perspective of Dr. Ljubica Jelušić for us is also very pertinent. You have a special experience also from the 1980s. You actually served also in the Yugoslav People's Army, but then you're also Minister of Defense of Slovenia, and you never had a problem in being very straight in what you said and being very honest in what you said. So in that sense, please be yourself, please.
Thank you very much, especially for invitation. And I must say that I'm really honored to be together in a panel with politicians with such long careers and so many experiences, especially with experiences that are around question of women, peace and security. And you are really bringing to us today in Slovenia stories, and I also think hopes how to change situation of women, especially in societies that are affected by war, but also in societies that that should think about what to do after war. And that's why I'm glad that Ms. Irene Felin has told us about the question of Ukraine and what will happen after war. And I also have, I would like to mention something, one dimension at the beginning that sometimes leads me to questions of what is happening with women after war, especially those ones that are members of armed forces. Whenever we were talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, and post-traumatic stress disorder, we always thought about men and how men felt afterwards and what is happening to them. We do not have many researches or surveys that would be done on what's happening to women and how do they feel after war. What kind of PTSD they have. And here I think it is still a lot to be done, especially in a medical or a psychotherapist fields, to think about what and how these women in Ukraine will going to feel when the war will be over. And the second issue, of course, which is also important, who will be the first one demobilized after that war? I hope that this will be soon. But the question is, who will be the one that defense politics will decide to dismiss at first? I'm afraid that there will be women who will be, although you said they are now bringing a big part of war burdens and so on, but I'm afraid that probably they will be the first one who will be given discharge, or they will be dismissed, and again the society will expect from them to care for children and care for elders, care for veterans and invalids and so on. I think that here we will have to do a lot, especially among our panel that deals with questions of women, peace and security, but also when we are speaking today about the 20th anniversary of Slovenian membership in NATO, I think that it is also good to know that even in a societies that think how democratic they are, sometimes questions of women are not so much put in forward as it seems maybe today when we are speaking about women mainstream or female foreign policy. I'm afraid that in a defense policy and in security policy, this female mainstreaming should still have to do a big steps forward in order to be at least similar to what's going on or what's happening within foreign policy matters. Although it is the fact that Tanja Fajon is the first foreign minister of female gender in our country, and if we think about defense ministers, especially in these 20 years, 2 decades of being within NATO, we have had 10 defense ministers in 20 years. 2 of them were female defense ministers. We have had, in this same time, 8 chief of staffs. And the fact is that we have had 1 female chief of staff. She was the only one, and up to now, I think, still the only general chief of staff within NATO countries. I hope that in future there will be some female generals leading chief of staffs also, not just from Slovenia, but also from other countries, especially from bigger countries, not such a small country as Slovenia is. When we were speaking about how to put ideas of gender mainstreaming into practice, I would like to mention 3 indicators that maybe show where and how it is possible for women to enter. The first indicator is connected with the question of conscription or recruitment for the armed forces. When we are thinking about Slovenian experiences, we should mention that when we were entering NATO 20 years ago, the decision, not just within our internal security issues, but also it was a kind of a move within Europe, was that it is good to join NATO without conscription. And this is something interesting for me, because the last 2 countries that joined NATO, Finland and Sweden, have conscription. 20 years ago, we thought that this is something outdated, that we should get rid of conscription as quickly as possible. But for a women perspective, it was important to get rid of conscription, because this was the only way that women were able to come into rank and file. Of course, we did have some women within Slovenian armed forces after independence, after 1991. Mainly, these were women in officer ranks. We didn't have occupational soldiers at that time, neither in a male structure, and of course, even less in a female structure. But approaching to NATO meant for us that we will also have to change our recruitment system into professional one. And having all these debates about professionalization of Slovenian armed forces, it also meant that if there won't be conscription, which is meant for men mainly by us, not in Sweden, by us, it was just for men. And that's when society first, then politicians within the parliament decided to at least freeze military conscription, or one part of it, it's military service, then it actually meant an open door for women to enter. The second issue important at that time was also where to find a suitable working force for armed forces. And again, this was also a new field where women were accepted fully, and also they have had many opportunities to join, not just as occupational soldiers, as privates, but also as they were promoted into non-commissioned officers, and they were also able to join as officers, which helped actually many women to become somehow more self-confident, especially in ideas and in a field of decision-making. And the question was how to put them into commanding positions. I think, I hope that General Ladislav Lipic is still with us or not. He was one of those chiefs of general staffs in our country who really put forward gender issue. He himself worked a lot to put those women within the armed forces that were competent, that were able, capable of leading military units. He was the one who put them into leading positions, especially in a combat units. And that was something new for us in Slovenia. Because before, we have had many officers, female officers, but they were mainly put into military education services, into the places where it was much more difficult to make a promising military career than it is in a combat units. And what has been done by General Lipic, it was the fact that he pushed, he helped, and he supported women officers that were able to become leaders. And he put them into leading position in a combat units. And I do hope that other chiefs of staffs and also all of you brigadiers and generals, future generals, some of you are already now generals and admirals. I hope that all of you understand that actually in a male-centric organization like military is, it's your duty to put women into commanding positions. It's no time to wait on women, that women will help women to be promoted. It's your duty. And I really hope that all of you, this is appeal now to male officers, all of you would help and support and contribute to more women in a leading position in combat units. And the third thing which I would like to mention in this connection, and I will stop with this, is what's going on in international operations and missions. And it was interesting for me that you mentioned this Nordic Center of Excellence on Gender in Military Operations, because Slovenian experiences in this regard are very interesting. At the beginning, when Slovenia entered into military operations, at that time these were mainly peacekeeping operations of United Nations, and afterwards military operations of NATO and European Union. It was in 1997 when we began to deploy our soldiers around the world and also members of Slovenian police. It was interesting that at that time, mainly men were sent to different peacekeeping operations. It was very difficult at the beginning. I would say within the first 6 to 7 years, to find a woman among those who were deployed. And afterwards, when Slovenian armed forces, because of preparing for becoming a member of NATO, and because of knowing that we will have to deploy not just individual soldiers and officers in peacekeeping operations, but also units, when units were deployed, then there were also women among them. So this was a very important new step related to our membership preparations for membership in NATO, and of course afterwards, when being members of NATO, then that units were deployed, and within that units there were also women. And what I would like to stress at the end, I'm really happy that our brigadiers and generals had enough courage to appoint 2 women as contingent commanders. One was in Anfisip in Cyprus, and the second one was in UNIFIL in Lebanon, which something says about different operations. And that brings me back to our minister, Tanja Fajon, and our work within United Nations Security Council. We were able to appoint women commanders of contingents in United Nations circles, United Nations military operations, not yet in EU or NATO-led operations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jelušić. Extremely interesting points, including this last one, as well as the first one, which was that really it was also NATO membership that helped women actually enter the military for real in Slovenia. So in that sense, of course, all of the discussions that we are having now or might have in the future regarding possible conscription will be extremely interesting also from this particular experience of yours. I'm being told that we are running out of time, but nonetheless, I would like to ask, does anybody have a question? Please, absolutely. There you go.
Thank you so much. Yes, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Alenka Verbole, and I am a former member of the NATO panel, the civil society panel on women, peace and security. Several questions. So, Dr. Jelušić, I really enjoyed your presentation, and that leads me to the first question to Madam Minister Fajon. Where does Slovenia stand now in terms of the action plan on women, peace and security? Has this been incorporated in a broader gender framework? And also, how the issues that you have just brought out will be mainstreamed in this document? Secondly, I was very happy to hear that Madame Linde mentioned the importance of gender mainstreaming in the armed forces and military. We know that military is still very much a masculine institution, and that also brings me to the question for Madame Feline, which is, we know that there have been some well, maybe a little bit provoking question. There have been some challenging views from the civil society in terms of cooperating with NATO. Obviously, because NATO stands for more masculine values, while civil society in the area of women, peace and security has a little bit different priorities. So how do you hope through your work and in cooperation with the panel to address this issue? And last but not least, what will NATO or how will NATO support women in Ukraine and in Gaza to join the peace processes? Thank you.
Yes, I think so. Thank you very much. I will try with the first question. With women, peace and security, I believe we are working very hard. It's one of our priority agendas also now in the Security Council and during the last year and a half of campaigning, because it's not only about women bringing to the decision-making processes what we heard together here, also women empowerment of girls and women in different conflicts is also prevention of conflicts and civilians, prevention and protection of civilians and women and girls that are mostly affected. But also when it comes to with women, peace and security agenda, we are also addressing different areas, climate change, security, all sorts of topics that are now discussed in General Assembly or Security Council. But let me stress also one important angle when it comes to women in a leading positions, what you heard a lot from us speaking here. In a General Assembly, we have an interesting statistics that in almost 80 general secretaries, if you look in the past, in the history, there were only 4 women. So there is a place of improvement, and we are also working on that, meaning that there is an idea that we are supporting that each year when we are discussing and the country is introducing the new candidate for the Secretary General, why not to put rotation every second year a female candidate? It's a challenging topic. It's not having a broader consensus because countries has to be engaged. But what we are asking is nothing too much, because if you look at the world population, we are half women, half men. So why not to have equal representation? Because I think these are the best then answers to the challenges we were discussing. But this is one aspect when we are discussing about women, peace and security. I was dealing a lot in the past with how to bring more women in mediation and negotiation processes, because statistics shows that when women, and you put good example of Yemen, when women are part of the mediation and negotiation processes, there are really better results. And we have women, but they are not part of mediation and negotiation processes. And we have a lot of place of improvement here too.
Thank you. Interesting to hear that you define NATO's values as a masculine values. For me, when we talk about the core values of the alliance, we talk about democracy, rule of law, individual liberty, and human rights. So for me, those are common values that apply both to men and women. What I can see, the struggle for women's-led organization and civil society to engage with NATO is that we are a political and military alliance. So the way in which we operate to preserve peace is also throughout deterrence and defense, so without military means. But we are there to not to go into a war, we are there to defend our territory. So certainly, UNSCR 1325 and the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, as we know, wants to promote the role of women to prevent conflict from happening throughout non-violent means. And this is where most probably the misunderstanding comes and the difficulty to engage. But I think that we all share the same values, and certainly the fact that we create a space, I as special representative, I create a space to engage with civil society. It's not only a space only for me, but it's a space for civil society to engage also across the alliance. So I'm not afraid of criticism, and none of us is. We are there to promote, as I said, the same values and to find the best way to promote 1 billion of the citizens and to engage with our partners outside. This is why I engage with women in Ukraine as well. And there is something that challenged me also personally when it comes to this agenda, is that when you go outside to Ukraine and you sit with women and you speak to them, the first thing they ask to you is to get more ammunition, regardless if they are from civil society, from the armed forces, or in the parliament. This is what they want, the right to defend themselves. And I think that this is now questioning what is the agenda today and how do we promote it collectively, without forgetting that what we all want for ourselves and the global society is a just peace and a stable world.
Well, my reaction to that is first to Tanja, who is underlining that any peace agreement will be more comprehensive. But there is also a lot of research showing that if women are in peace agreement, and it's just, I think, 17% of the peace agreements with women, they are more sustainable with a 30% longer time before something happens. And they try to see why is that. And one reason is that women has other points in society to argue for continuing with the peace agreement, and also to honor the peace agreement. So, and this is by a lot of research. So it's nothing that we think women are more peaceful or something like that. It's just for other reasons. So it's kind of a good thing to do. And the second thing is that I'm a special advisor on foreign affairs on the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, which is one of the party political think tanks in Brussels. Each party group gets a think tank funded by the European Parliament. And we have a collective of 60 roughly politicians, academians, and civil society organizations who worked on how to develop the feminist foreign policy. And the first policy brief that will come out now is what is a feminist defense policy. And we had a big meeting with all different aspects of what this is. And Tanja took part in the meeting. Radmila Sekerinskaya, who was the former Minister of Defense of North Macedonia, took part. I, of course, take part. I'm one of the co-chairs. And, of course, there are different views. But the thing is that there is clearly a lot of gender possibilities, gender dimensions that could be put into defense policy, and that is what we now will present, a policy brief that will come in the autumn. So I hope that you will be interesting. It will be interesting for you to read this.
I will just make a final short remark, because I know that we run not just out of time of our panel, but also out of a break. The problem that we are facing now in NATO is that officially we are talking about how to produce more ammunition, and the women are asking for peace. Because when you would like to find out who are leaders of peace initiatives, of different NGOs that are now dealing, for example, with Ukraine and also in Gaza, with Gaza, these are mainly women. And I think that we will have to bring together these two worlds. The world who would like to have more ammunition, which means prolongation of war, and the world that would like to have a peace as soon as possible. Thank you.
Well, I think that the fact that we have not only used up our time, but also used up our coffee break time shows that the topic was the right one, for sure. And since we are out of time, let me just conclude by saying the following. Perhaps when we're talking about NATO and these issues, we should always remember also the words of the first Secretary General of NATO, Lord Ismay, about the NATO symbol, which he actually designed. And when he was asked, what does this star mean, the four-pointed star, what does it mean? He said, this star represents the compass which keeps us on the right path, which is the path of peace. And with that, I would like to thank all of our four panelists once again. And since this is a NATO-related event, I would just like to inform you also that we'll be testing your resilience, which means that you're not having a coffee break, but you're going straight into the next panel. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Everyone to the final panel. Vojko, somebody. Ambassador Vojko Vok called to the panel. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us to the final panel of the day, entitled Back to the Roots and Collective Defense, 75 Years of NATO. As we all know, this is why we're here today. In April, NATO will mark 75th anniversary, and also this will coincide with the 20th anniversary of Slovenian membership in the alliance. I really cannot imagine a more fitting time to be holding this panel discussion and with the panelists that we have than on this occasion. NATO has rightfully been labeled as the most successful and longest-standing political military alliance in history. We also heard that from General Cavoli on the panel earlier today. And since the inception, it has ensured and is still ensuring the security of its member states and its populations, amounting to 1 billion people and half of the world's military and economic might. It is an alliance of countries which, first and foremost, adhere to certain values and aspire to better themselves and their own societies when it comes to these values of the rule of law, democracy, and the freedoms that we hold and aspire to. It is crucial to evaluate what lies at the core of NATO and what is actually at the core of this alliance, and of course put this in the context of the security environment we find ourselves in today. In the past decades, we have enjoyed, I believe, immense peace and prosperity, and also due to the decisions of the policymakers and defense establishment and politicians to harness this alliance. You will understand that many of you are sitting in this room today that are also, because of you and your decisions and your work, we find ourselves in this situation. The fact that we've had so much prosperity and peace. But now I believe we're also witnessing a turning point. Because the global alignment of power and interests is shifting. We can all feel that. We've talked about this today, and we're coming back to this discussion. The rule of law-based order is under severe strain. We are living in a very unpredictable security environment marked by war in Europe and the highest number of armed conflicts since the Cold War. Of course, NATO is shifting in response to that. We are returning to our roots, prioritizing collective defense, committing to a new approach. And it's very important to address how we see the security in Europe, what are the key threats and challenges. We have unique regional perspectives also represented at this panel, given that our different geographic locations. And we definitely sadly agree that we live in a more dangerous world right now than we did 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. So how do we address these challenges and how to strengthen NATO? With us today is a great panel, a great set of panelists to help us approach these questions, and that I am very honored to introduce Minister of Defense Marjan Šarec. You're also the former Prime Minister of the Republic of Slovenia and led the first minority government in the history of Slovenia between 2018 and 20. Prior to that, you were also the mayor of municipality of Kamnik. A great place, if you haven't visited, would be a good time. I have to say, you're... Now that I'm not there anymore. Now you're not there anymore. Your government was among other achievements also countered the downward trend in defense expenditures and increased investments in the equipment, armaments and training of the Slovenian armed forces. Second on the panel, Minister of Defense of Romania, Angel Tîlvăr, thank you so much for joining us. Since 2020, Mr. Tîlvăr was a senator where he held positions of the President of Committee on European Affairs and was the member of Commission for Investigating Abuses, Fighting Corruption and Petitions. He was also a member of the Romanian delegation of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. And you, sir, hold a PhD in International Relations and served also as a Minister Delegate of Diaspora. Thank you for visiting Slovenia. Mr. Vojko Vok, or Ambassador Vok, last but not least, State Secretary for International Affairs and National and International Security at the Office of the Prime Minister of the Republic of Slovenia. Ambassador Vok, you have a rich career in diplomacy, having led positions of State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and served as Ambassador to Italy and Croatia and Consul General in Trieste. And you are also the veteran of the Slovenian Independence War. Let's start out our discussions today. Minister Šarec, what is the greatest success of the main achievements of the alliance when you look back? And also, what lessons do we draw from the war in Ukraine about our own security?
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear friend Angel and Vojko. Well, NATO has come a long way since 1949, when it was created, and it faced several crises. We must remember 1961, building of Berlin Wall, then Cuban crisis, and then the end of Cold War, Vietnam War, and all the other crises, in Korean War, when East and West faced each other with indirectly with weapons, but NATO survived. We were faced in, I think, 2019 with the expression that NATO is brain dead. Of course, we are far from it now. Everything changed, but since we know that history has the ability to repeat itself, sometimes as a farce, sometimes as a tragedy, we are now in a stage when we received a wake-up call on 24th of February 2022, and NATO again has raison d'être. So we are faced with huge challenges in today's world. We have Ukrainian war, we have war in Middle East, and we mustn't forget the Western Balkans. Western Balkans area is also some kind of barrel of gunpowder, and the answers for this situation we can partly find also in history of NATO. History of NATO shows us that NATO was capable to prevent military conflict. NATO was able to deter the Soviet Union danger and its satellites, and NATO is the best possible alliance during all the periods. Like democracy is the best possible system, there hasn't been invented better than NATO is political and military alliance, and nobody invented better yet. So for Slovenia, we are now celebrating 20 years of membership. For Slovenia, NATO is one of two best things that happened to us. The second is European Union. And the same goes to Europe as a whole, because NATO is about partnership, NATO is about brotherhood, NATO is about not only Article 5, of course. I hope that never comes again to Article 5, but we mustn't speak about only Article 5 or only Article 3, as we are doing now, but we have to be prepared for combinations of both articles. And I think that NATO can be treated as a most successful alliance during these periods, and it's up to us now what we'll do after 75 years of NATO. Will we develop further? And partly we are already there, because entering Finland and Sweden into NATO, it speaks more than 1,000 words. Who would dare to even think about Finland and Sweden entering our brotherhood alliance? Nobody. But thanks to Mr. Putin, we are here now, and we are 32 of us. So I'm very optimistic about our alliance. I think that we must focus ourselves, what goals we need to achieve, and how to prevent Russia to win in Ukraine. That's our main task at this moment. Everything else is in the second row now. So that would be my conclusion, that NATO has been successful, has found its reason again, and we must go further in this way.
Thank you very much, Minister. Minister Tîlvăr, the NATO strategic concept adopted in 2022 signifies a fundamental shift, which we also spoke earlier today, back towards collective territorial defense. Do you believe we share common threat perceptions among NATO members in Europe? What would be your view of the security challenges ahead?
Thank you. I want to say hello to all of you. And first, let me add a few things connected to the first question that my honorable friend answered. And I would like to focus the importance of NATO in terms of regional approach. Both Romania and other countries from the Balkans switched from a way of organizing society from communism to democracy. One of the elements that were extremely important for us was becoming members, as Marian said, becoming members of EU and of NATO. Nobody would have imagined 30 years ago that this will be the way. What I want to focus upon is something that I had during my experience as a NATO Parliamentary Assembly member and chair of a committee. When we produced a report, I was a rapporteur for the report that dealt with how young generation report themselves to NATO. And one of the conclusions we reached at was that NATO for many years was considered to be a given, and that we are not supposed to reinforce it, we are not supposed to push to this idea, which is one of the most generous ideas in the history of mankind, if we take into consideration the fact that it covers the security needs and necessities of more than 1 billion inhabitants of this planet. So what I want to focus upon is the importance of reinforcing the idea of NATO, supporting the idea of NATO, and endowing and endorsing the idea of NATO with a way of supporting it in terms of let's say resources. As far as the second part of my intervention is concerned, the strategic concept, of course, is important because it produces, and I will speak on not on behalf, but from the perspective of my country. For us, Black Sea is of paramount importance, Black Sea region. I wouldn't lay in front of you, because I'm sure that it was part of your conversation today, how important are the Western Balkans connected to the Black Sea region. The new strategic concept made it more clearer that this region, the region I come from, is important for NATO alliance. If we look further at the Vilnius summit, for instance, the region of Black Sea was better and more keenly underlined as it gained in importance, and we still are interested in profiling the Black Sea region in terms and in the perspective of NATO. And I would like to add some support for my idea. Both Marianne and me share the idea that EU is a source not only of prosperity but also of conflict diminishing and of support for democracy. Around the Black Sea, we have Georgia, which was an aspiring country. Now it's a candidate state. We have Ukraine, and Ukraine is a country that is the victim of the unprovoked aggression of Russia. We have Moldova, which is a frontliner in terms of the pressure that Russia does, and in terms of hybrid attacks. We have Romania with its specificity. We've just announced that we will increase our spendings for our most eastern military base, which is Mihail Cogălnicianu. Will give more than 2.5 billion euros to enlarge and expand this military base that can cover the necessities of security of Black Sea. We go further to Bulgaria, we'll go further to Turkey. So from this perspective, we assess that the harassment and the provocations of Russia won't cease. We expect for years from now on that Russia will be present, will try to harass, will try to test reactions and so on. So it is extremely important for us all to be present, to be resilient, to be prepared for this. From this perspective, if we discuss about a strategic concept or about the strategic compass, because we have another perspective of defense that refers to EU, I think that things are on a good way. I reinforce and I fully agree with what Marian says, that NATO is the way it should be. It's based on values, first of all. We all 32, we share the same values, so this is the kernel of the alliance. The second thing I would like to add, and I'll try not to speak too much, is the fact that we should not forget that NATO is a political military alliance. So it's important because we need political decisions, we need political reflection on everything we do within NATO. So I think that NATO should be considered as being the most effective and the most democratic or the most efficient way of defending the free and democratic world against any other challenge. The same thing is reflected even in the strategic concept or in the strategic compass. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Now, Ambassador Vogt, we heard Minister Tîlvăr just say that NATO was considered to be a given at some point, but NATO also rests on the transatlantic alliance. And I apologize ahead for the very provocative question I'm about to give you, but do you believe, I mean, to what degree, how solid is the transatlantic alliance as the backbone of NATO? Are we worried about the US role in leadership in NATO given the potential political challenges? How would you respond to that?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say that I agree with everything that was said. My two ministers, because we also spoke about these things during the lunch, so we are at the same page. So, and it was also shown. About transatlantic relations, I will tell something that maybe somebody would not expect to hear it from me, but in many aspects, the period of Mr. Trump's presidency was very, very good for Europe because we have lived too long in a comfort zone. And of course, the future of transatlantic relations will be deeply decided also by the next American elections, and there's no secret about it because there is one candidate saying that he can finish war in Ukraine in one day. So you can imagine how can you do that. But what was our comfort zone? The comfort zone was something that America never did. We were being convinced for 20 years that spending for the defense is stupid and that nobody will ever attack us. And we believed that. Politicians in Europe believed that. Now we were attacked. Ukraine is part of Europe that was attacked. Crimea is the part of the world that was annexed by Russia, and it was did as the first country after the Second World War. Nobody did that before, annexation of the foreign territory. Nobody did that before to attack another country in order to occupy it and to annex it again to the Russian whatever empire. So that was our guilt. That was our sin. Then we believed also, and they were trying to convince us, many politicians, that we should not enlarge NATO, because we are now, with that, we are provoking Russia. They were trying to convince us that Russia is afraid of NATO, so NATO must not come to the borders of Russia. So let me be very frank and not to lose many times in this discussion. Russia was never afraid of NATO. Putin is not afraid of NATO. Putin is afraid of democracy. Putin is afraid of the model that the European Union is giving to the whole free world and to all people. They try to come to Europe and to live in freedom and democracy. And this democracy and this role is endangering his leadership in Russia, which is not democratic. And especially Ukraine was seen as a threat for him because Ukraine was doing well. At least there was more liberty, more freedom in Ukraine. At least Pussy Riot could sing in Ukraine and they couldn't sing in Russia. So they went to sing in Ukraine to have full concerts because they couldn't sing in Russia. No, in Russia they were put in jail. Okay? So that was really endangering the Putin's regime. Then they were convincing us, politicians, that NATO is a dangerous organization that is aggressive, attacking others and so on. And as a proof, it was attack on Belgrade in 1999. And we were forgetting to oppose this thing because we didn't wake up in the morning and say, okay, NATO, we don't have to do nothing today. Let's go bomb Belgrade just to see what happens. We were reacting to the possibility that Srebrenica will be repeated. And they were doing this again, Milosevic's regime, with people of Kosovo. 800,000 people were already fled from Kosovo when we intervened. We were afraid, literally afraid, that Sarajevo bombardment will be repeated. Srebrenica will be repeated. 150,000 deaths in Balkan War will be repeated. We believed also that. So, transatlantic relations could be much stronger when we will realize that we must spend more for our defense and that every member state must be able to provide defense for himself. It's like with your health. If you don't do enough for your own health, no doctor can help you. And that's the same with Slovenia. And we are trying to do this with this government. I don't even like to speak about how we will achieve 2%. I would like to see how much we will spend to be able to fulfill our obligations, how much can we spend for our defense in order to be able to deliver also for NATO. Because NATO, at the end of the day, is the organization of only democracies and the most developed countries in the world. And everybody wants to join NATO, except for some radical extremist party in Slovenia who wants to go out of NATO. So let me finish with my firm belief that transatlantic relations are still the pillar of the defense of the democratic world, which we call West, but it's a democratic world, in addition for our Indo-Pacific partners, which are New Zealand, Australia, Japan, and South Korea, because the alternative that you have on the table is China, Russia, neutrality, which doesn't exist anymore, and non-aligned movement, which is what it is now. So there is no space not to say that NATO is the group of the most advanced and democratic countries in the whole world. And who are we fighting? Everybody can see. Russia is who we are fighting now. And if you ask me, Russia must be stopped. It was said recently by our most renowned, world-known philosopher Slavoj Žižek, who usually is very on the left and very critical to the capitalistic West, okay. But what he said recently should be taken seriously. He said, Putin must be stopped because he is a dark dictator and religious fanatic. He is all those three things and he should be stopped. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've spoke a lot about values, and Minister Šarec, I wanted to start addressing slightly more regional perspectives. NATO's enlargement has been a historic success, and this is especially the case for Western Balkan countries. It's been a source of stability in the region. How important is it maintaining a credible Euro-Atlantic perspective for the other potential members?
Well, it's the basis of everything. Without credibility, there has no sense to make new members and to promise them something, because if they won't believe us, it has no sense. So I think that especially for Western Balkans, it's the most important thing that we give them credibility. Regarding also to European Union, not only NATO, it's a package. Well, some countries joined NATO first and then European Union. Some did vice versa, but I think it's very important to be credible, that these nations who would want to join us, that they believe us, that they are sure that we will deliver our commitments. And yes, as Vojko mentioned, I agree that some said that enlargement of NATO is a threat for world peace because Russia is afraid of it and everything. But who are we to judge, or who is Russia to judge somebody if he wants to join? Because it's right of every nation to be aligned where it wants to be aligned. And of course, Slovenia is a good example of it. We fought quite a war for independence. It was, some say it's only 10 days, but it's unimaginable if we would have in Slovenia such a war as it was later in Croatia or Bosnia and Herzegovina. Srebrenica was mentioned. So we are very lucky. It was only 10 days. But Milosevic's politics, it was basically the same as Putin's now. Because it was expansionist ambitions. They tried to achieve new territory, and our independence was gained with our military, which was called then territorial defense. And of course, when we achieved our independence, we were keen on being in the society of nations who would respect us, who would share the same values. We didn't want to go back to Yugoslavia or any other alignment and alliance. And of course, NATO was the only goal for us that we wanted to achieve. And on the referendum, it was excellent result then, and majority of the people voted yes, and I'm sure they would do the same today. So I wouldn't be bothered too much with those who say that we should exit NATO or we should be neutral, because neutrality means even bigger expenditures than without collective security. So yes, our credibility is at stake any day, and we must be prepared to enlargement. Not only NATO, also European Union is very important for those countries who want to join the democratic world, to share our values. So I think the main word is efficiency.
Thank you. And if I could just stay 1 second more on the Western Balkans. We have seen actual Russian escalation of hybrid activities, other activities in Western Balkans. How do you assess, where is this going? What's the situation, security? What's the greatest challenge in terms of security? And what else can we do also as Slovenia to support our regional partners?
Well, cyber threats are the most dangerous threats of our today's life, and hybrid threats, and we must put as much effort as we can to prevent them. We are under constant attacks, of course, it's nothing new, and Western Balkans is a chessboard now for players like Russia, like China, and of course, if we won't be there, there will be vacuum, and somebody else will be there. And it's nothing new. It's no science. it's obvious. So we must do everything to not only give money to Western Balkan states, but political solution is needed. We must join with them, and that's the only possible solution, and that's also the solution for Serbia and Kosovo and all the other areas where crises are present. So we must do everything to achieve this goal, because any other solution is not possible or it won't be efficient.
Thank you. Minister Tîlvăr, you've already mentioned the importance of the Black Sea region. Now that Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that strategic importance has increased further. In light of the further Russian destabilizing activities, which, as you already said, we can expect, how do you see your country's future role as a host nation of forward land forces, as well as in the implementation of new defense plans in a strategic direction of the Southeast?
Thank you for a question, because it gives me the possibility of presenting our vision on the region. And the last answer I gave to your question had some elements of background. Now I'll be more specific. When we speak about Black Sea, we used to have a mental image associated with the sea, a place of free trade and peace. For some time, things changed. Nobody would have imagined, in Romania, for instance, I don't want to speak on behalf of others, that we will find 97 mines floating on the Black Sea. Some of them entered our territorial waters, our national waters. We have to deal with them. Others went further. Others went on the other side of the Black Sea. Fact two, nobody would have imagined that in the Danube Delta, a place I invite you all to visit, we will find remains of drones, of Russian drones, falling on the national territory, on the national soil of Romania. I was there. The distance between a house of some peaceful and hard-working fishermen and the harbor of Ismail, a civilian harbor that was attacked with Russian drones, is around 800 meters. The activity of AA equipment of our Ukrainian neighbors and friends made possible that remains of drones fall on our territory. Imagine the preoccupation of our citizens. Imagine the preoccupation of decision makers. For me, as a Minister of Defense, there weren't the most interesting days in my life, because I have to answer a lot of questions. I have to answer the legitimate preoccupations not only of decision makers, and I include here the parliamentarians, the representatives and so on, but also the questions of the normal, ordinary, hardworking citizens of Romania. So this is the context. We have to deal with what we are doing. Romania, as Marian said, and I was very glad that he spoke about Article 5, and he also spoke about Article 3. Article 3 makes a lot of sense. That's why for 6 years we had 2% of our budget dedicated to military spendings, and for 2 years we have 2.5. Due to our legislation, which is legislation that should include offset and so on, we weren't able to spend all the money last year, for instance, but we'll spend them in the next year because we have a multi-annual approach of spendings. But the spendings for military increased for 6 years and with 2%, now with 2.5. So for 8 years, and having the support of the population, because both me and Marian and my colleague here, we come from the civil part of the society, and the democracies made possible for civilians to be in the ministries of defense, which makes sense. And of course, we have to ask and have the support of the parliaments, of the representatives of the people for almost all the decisions we make. This is easy in democracies because people understood that we are on the good side of the history and of life, while in autocracies like others, citizens are practically not questioned or consulted as far as this kind of decisions are made. So we made the decision to offer the necessary resources to procure equipment, and we are in the position now to have Patriot, to have HIMARS, to have F-16. We had the possibility, and we are speaking about how we are prepared. We had the possibility with our allies, and Marian was one of the supporters, to have the F-16 training center, that gives us the possibility of training our own pilots, but also Ukrainian friends or others from the alliance, because we speak about an alliance. Together with our Turkish friends and Bulgarian friends, we created a task group that deals with demining the Black Sea. The reasons have just been presented by me a few minutes ago, and we discussed today in our bilateral meeting. The format is an open one, so our allies and friends and strategic partners can participate in this activity, because having a safe Black Sea is important for Balkans, is important for the trade in the region, because, as you know, due to the incidents that were on the Black Sea, the price of the insurance increased. A number of companies do not work in this area in order to transport different goods. So this is what we do, and we will continue to do it. I mentioned the expansion, the fact that we'll expand MK, but we are also interested in Western Balkans, because we can't separate Western Balkans from the Black Sea region. That's why Romania participates with more than 400 militaries in Bosnia and Herzegovina, in Altea mission. We are also present in Pristina and in Kosovo with militaries. We are also present in Bulgaria. We are also present in Poland. We are also present in Central African Republic. So we received, due to or using the framework, France as framework nation, we receive security. We have more than 1,700 militaries at Cinku. We also have almost 3,000 American militaries at Mihailko Golničar, but we also provide air policing, and our mission in Lithuania has ended not a very long time ago. And I think this is how things should work. I discussed with Marian, and it is extremely probable to have militaries from Slovenia for different exercises or activities in Romania. At our turn, we are present in different places. This is how things work. I'm glad that the things work this way, And we will continue to defend democracy. We will continue to defend the eastern flank, which is the eastern flank of Europe and NATO. And I think what we do has the support of our citizens. I think this is a key statement. Everything we do within NATO, either in this format or in bilateral format, has the support of our citizens. And this makes us different from others. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have it.
Ambassador Vogt, I actually wanted to give you the opportunity to reply. I know you've also spent part of your career working in Western Balkans. Perhaps give your perspective as well on the security situation there, and then respond to anything that you've heard from the ministers.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I would like to say that there are many discussions and many questions whenever we go to speak and to have kind of lectures and so on. Who will win the war? Who will be the winner? Who will be defeated? And so on, which is rather stupid. Putin is putting ahead his narrative and saying Russia cannot be defeated. And we run after him and we discuss with him about that. But why should he be defeated? Nobody attacked him. He attacked Ukraine. He's aggressor and Ukraine is victim. So we are not attacking Russia. We don't even dream to defeat a power that is nuclear power. How can you defeat a nuclear power? And in a clash between two nuclear powers, the only result is the destruction of the planet. But Putin must be stopped. That's the truth. And he cannot be stopped as Milosevic was stopped in 1999. He was stopped without putting boots on the ground in Serbia. So this is a completely different story, much more dangerous, but NATO is still there, and NATO has this responsibility to stop Putin. One of the steps to stop Putin is to ensure that the Balkans is safe from Russian influence. And this is what we finally did with Bosnia, was that on the last European Council meeting, we took a common decision to start negotiations also with Bosnia, and now we have all countries on board moving somehow towards European Union, which for the first time after 20 years is considering seriously to go into enlargement, because we now say enlargement needs to be paid, but at the end it pays. So this is the first step. The second step is to what I was saying before, to enable us to defend ourselves. But at the end of the day, we must consider also the situation that only Europe is in. And we are forgetting this. We are, for the first time in our history, caught in a sandwich between two wars, one in the east and one on the south. And we are bleeding on the both parts. We are bleeding materially, our economy is bleeding, also because Mediterranean Sea is practically closed now because of the Houthis in what are they doing, and practically Red Sea and Suez are closed. Our ports are running out of business. Even Slovenian port Koper is running out of business. We pay a political price because our public opinions are turning against Europe, that is not for them doing enough to stop war in Gaza, and that war must be stopped. I don't know if we can sustain two wars for too long time from now, and I truly believe that we made a step forward on the last European Council, saying and adopting for the first time common position to stop that war. Now we have a resolution in Security Council, also produced by Slovenian diplomacy there, to stop war in Gaza, because otherwise we will lose complete our credibility in the global south, in the countries that are not affected by this war. They will not believe us that we are really. They will accuse us of double standards, why there are sanctions for Russia and there are no sanctions for Israel and so on. So with prolonging of these conflicts, we are really getting in trouble. And there is no secret that in both those two wars, leaders are awaiting elections in the United States for whatever the result will be. So we must shake up our hands, take this task in front of us very seriously. We have a summit in Washington, which needs to be a success. If it's not a success, it will be a disaster. And we must all fulfill our duties until then. And also for the sake of Europe, we will need to address also the political issues and strategical issues, because not many people understand that the world has completely changed, especially in Slovenia. Some people still live in a world where Russia was an ally and Germany and Italy was the enemy. Now it's the opposite. It's completely opposite. Now Germany and Italy are allies and Russia is the enemy. This is for the beginning, and then we will go for other solutions. Thank you.
Even though we started late, I just wanted to say, we're going to run the panel a little bit past the hour. So I do want to do another round because the panelists are really challenging us to think outside the box and inside the box, of course. So I wanted to actually pose a slightly longer question to all three of you, and then we can actually do a concluding round, and please pick up any part that you would like. We have heard here today, and also from you, that we are spending and boosting defense capabilities. Actually, spending has increased in every NATO country since 2014. NATO has invested in the biggest reinforcements in collective defense in generations. Yet, we are still hearing about challenges, production capabilities, for example, in ammunition. We are still hearing some skeptical voices, maybe about our unity of the NATO alliance. Are we demonstrating a commitment for standing together, and are we doing enough to safeguard our democracies? And the second part, Ambassador Vok, you just mentioned something very important, and that is a potential gap between how the policymakers and people in this room are viewing the security environment and how the publics in Europe are perceiving it. What impact, this will have an impact on our defense policies, and what do you think it's going to be? Are we people viewing the problem, our citizens, the same way as we are? So, concluding response from each of you, please. Minister Šarec, would you like to start?
Well, yes, for Slovenian audience, it's probably very interesting to hear what Angel has to say, because his country is very near to Russia, because in Slovenia there's a huge lack of awareness in some parts what stage are we in. So I think that this, we remember Snake Island, it's very near to Romania. So we must be aware that spendings will have to grow. And Slovenia has spent in last 3 years for 70% more for defense as in previous period. So we are aware of it, that the sleeping is over. We got a wake-up call, and we must be very active to get on the stage that we will be prepared, because one saying says, I think it's Latin, that you must prepare for war to maintain peace. So it's a paradox, but it's kind of true. So some people don't understand what deterrence means. They say we must disarm ourselves and we must start negotiate and etc., etc. But the deterrence is a crucial thing, and you cannot make deterrence without equipment, without enough troops, and without accurate mindset. So we are doing our best to fill these gaps that we are facing for now 10 years. Not only Slovenia, every country was in such a mood. So yes, it's very important to have these initiatives. We've joined the Czech initiative for for ammunition. But we must be very focused. As I mentioned, our goals must be centralized, because if we won't be united, I think unity is crucial for achieving this goal, because Russia is now in war industry stage, and of course it can be very resilient, and in the short term we will face a lot of challenges, or we are facing it now. So that's why awakeness is crucial in this moment, and so European Union as such must produce more, produce and buy, and grow our growth of expenditures as NATO alliance is getting there now. Of course, Romania is on 2.5%. I'll repeat for Slovenian some skeptics, 2.5. So it's yes, and he's a normal person. He's a normal person. He's a minister, and he's even a professor of English. Yes, and my friend. So yes, for those Slovenian skeptics who say that we must negotiate and that we must disarm, no, on the contrary, we must see this Angel's struggle for approval of Romanian armed forces. So he said it all, and Vojko said it all, and of course we won't be fighting nuclear. We are against boots on the ground, of course, but it's our sacred duty now to produce more, to be more effective in this manner, and there's nothing to it.
First, let me thank Marian for his kind words. He said he covered almost all the areas of interest if we speak about how we prepare for the future in terms of military. Of course, I had to underline the necessity to produce as much as possible on national territory. This is what we want to do, because it's a fact of life that we don't produce what we need all in our country. So we want to improve this. We have adapted laws in such a way that some procurement should be accompanied by offset component. Of course, there are debates whether we should make alliance in order to procure cheaper and faster. It's a fact of life that the demand increased exponentially while the production remained almost the same. That's why it's quite difficult, and we have a challenge in front of us to explain everybody that if we pay something now, the possibility of having it immediately is quite small, and it's a normal way of putting things for the citizens to ask how it's possible to pay for something and have it after several years, when the countries have a lot of priorities like education, health system, and so on. But it's up to us to be as transparent as possible, as frank as possible, and as open as possible to try to get the public support, because this is an obsession of mine, to have public support for what I'm doing, in order to persuade and convince people to support this necessity, because this necessity is generated by the realities we are living through. After covering this component of procurement, of equipment, of specialized industry and so on, I would like to focus at the end of my intervention upon the main resource of an army, which is the human resource. I think there are debates in all the countries here, including countries that chose neutrality, and I salute our friends from Austria. It's a discussion about how people are encouraged to join this very honorable and respected profession as a military, and how can we do to convince as many as possible of those who have the age and can retire to still remain within the military forces. This is, I think, another challenge which is as important as a necessity of having the most developed in terms of technical specifications equipments. That's why I wanted to lay before you this perspective, that if we think and we speak a lot about procurement and about budgets for military, we should not leave aside the human component, the militaries that are the main resources of an army. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ambassador Vogt, final words. Final word goes to you.
Let me finish with an anecdote. I had a discussion with a group of World War II veterans a couple of months ago. And I was risking a lot because we were in the restaurant and we had a couple of drinks, of course. And when they were trying to convince me that Russia has some reasons what Russia is doing, and that Russia needs to be understood, that Russia has the historical reasons to retake Ukraine, and that Ukrainians are crazy to fight unbeatable Russia and blah, blah. I said, but are you hearing yourselves? You're the, at least, heirs of the war, veterans of the Second World War. No? But when Hitler came to Maribor in 1941, and when he said, make me this land German again, many applied to that. Because even Putin said, Ukraine is Russia and I will make it Russia again. But some opposed. They were rebels. They said, no, no, no. This is our country. We are going to defend it for any cost, despite the huge power of Germany. And my father, my grandfather, they all went to woods to fight occupator. And now you are preaching me this? This is not working. You are spitting in your own history. The first reaction was terrible. And they had a couple of drinks, okay. But somehow I survived. I didn't tell them that if they would do this, if Ukrainians would do that now, they were turned into quislings, all of them, like we had in Slovenia, you know, those who were traitors. I didn't say that because it would be, then I would be beaten maybe. But I promised to receive their delegation. They said, we will write a letter for peace in Ukraine and we will bring it to you. So after a couple of weeks, I received this delegation and they bring me this letter. It was also published publicly, asking Prime Minister of Slovenia to operate for peace in Ukraine, to do everything to stop the war in Ukraine. So I discussed with them. I said, writer is really nice, but the address is wrong. What do you mean address? Here says to Prime Minister of Slovenia, you should address to Mr. Vladimir Putin, Moscow. That's it.
Thank you very much, distinguished panelists. We have run out of time, despite the fact we could probably sit here for another hour. Thank you for your strong messages of commitment and unity. And I believe it is your work that will enable NATO to overcome the challenges that face us. So please join me in thanking our panelists.